Yes. Aurélie, do you want to start us going?
Yes, yes, definitely. So actually today we thought it was a good idea to start our first salon online. We've done a couple of salons, the Resonance at the Vortex before, and the idea is really to make everyone discuss about various spiritual subjects, philosophical subjects. I think nowadays we are living something quite exceptional, and the idea is really to focus the thematic about it today, and to see how everyone is dealing with this situation creatively, and as an artist, how they manage to create and to still find the inspiration to create. And so that's the subject of the discussion today. I'd like also to, of course, introduce Resonance. This is a concept that we started in 2017 with an amazing support of the Vortex, who has hosted us. We performed at the Vortex 3 times, or 4 times actually, since 2017. And the idea of Resonance is all about it's multidisciplinary performance where a lot of different art forms are meeting and dialoguing, fusioning all together. Dance, poetry, music, and painting live, and it's welcoming philosophers and thoughts to join us in the evolution of the ideas. It's an evolving project, and we always taking new shape and directions. So we have amazing members. Lei has been part of it from the beginning. Lei Louge, amazing visual artist. She took part in the first Resonance in 2017. Let's start to introduce, I think, the core members of Resonance here today. And then we are opening the discussion, of course, to everyone here who would like to tell us their experience regarding the lockdown as an artist. So maybe Lei, maybe you could start by introducing.
Sorry if I interrupt.
Yeah, sure.
Because in my experience of Zoom, the best things is if everybody keep the microphone switched off.
Yes,
people who don't speak, because
I think so,
the background noise disturb a lot. Then who switch it on, the other people off. That's
right. Great.
I have just muted everybody.
Well, I'm going to unmute myself.
Yeah, absolutely. When you're talking, unmute yourself.
And we can start to introduce the artist, I think. And every artist can unmute themselves when we're talking. So, Aurélie, would you like to start with the...
Yes. So actually, Petra, would you like to start to talk about you as an artist, as a dancer? What is your practice, and also how you're dealing at the moment with isolation?
Hi, I'm Petra. I'm a contemporary dancer and a tap dancer. Normally, I work as part of the Resonance group as a contemporary dancer to interpret the live music. I also work as a tap dancer, where I'm an improvising musician, currently working with the piano duo as well, Richard Adam Lewis. I'm in Germany now. I left London because I thought I'd get through this isolation better if I have a bit more space around me and not trapped in a flat share. So I'm in Germany at my parents' house, and I just keep myself busy trying to do Zoom meetings with people that I work with normally in London collaboratively, and I train and practice. Yeah.
Great, thanks a lot. And we've done a Resonance online actually early April, where we saw, all the team were performing from their own place. It was quite challenging because usually we like responding to each other really spontaneously, and we feel more three-dimensionally what happens when we are all together. And yes, but it's an interesting challenge. And yeah. So would you like Hyolim to talk a bit about what you do? You're an amazing flutist musician. You are in Seoul at the moment.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Haerim Kim. I'm playing Korean traditional music on my flutes. It's called the Taegum. It's a Korean bamboo flute. But because I'm currently based in London, so I've been working with different sort of musicians and artists. So I'm very much interested in integrate different kind of styles of music and different disciplines, including dance, poetry, and visual arts. And I'm currently stay in South Korea. Yeah, just spend time with my friends and family. Yeah, the situation in Korea is a little bit better than the UK. Nice.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you're all free and welcome to share image and video of what
quotes,
you would like, you know,
if
and
possible,
quotes.
I would like to add in the chat box, you can share words and quotes about art and isolation, and this around this thematics, and also questions are welcome.
Definitely.
There's more people arriving. Hello, everybody.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for
Welcome to
joining.
we're now at 18. So.
Nice.
Yes.
Can we continue with, can we ask Gwen to introduce herself and her art?
Yeah, hi, good morning everyone, or good afternoon. I'm a visual artist, and it's been a great pleasure to be part of the Resonance group and go to these regular Salon meetings to explore ideas and bounce off each other. My art is really two ways. On the one hand, I do live sketching at live events, music, dance, poetry, and I really love capturing the energy of those moments, really being in the moment. And on the other hand, in my studio is when I take a step back and I can reflect on that inspiration. And here I do experimental screen printing, so very free, and some painting. It's all based on music and dance, the music that I experience at the live events, and also the dancing method that I do myself, as well as watching amazing contemporary dance and tap dance as well. It's been a pleasure to work together with Petra as well in that respect. Yeah.
It's a pleasure to work with you, with all of us, Gwen. And can I ask you, how are you building your strength and resilience in this time of isolation?
In this lockdown, it's been a very strange experience for all the misery and sadness that's going on in the wider world. I feel I've crawled into my own bubble and I lived like a hermit in my own studio. And it's been the most prolific time ever in the sense that I've been able to create without any distractions. And I feel it's been a real time of focus on the work, and also on introspection and reflection, revisiting sketchbooks, revisiting sketches I've done at live events, and kind of rethink my reaction to that. So even if the lockdown ends, I will try to create this kind of hermit existence once in a while again, because it's been amazing from a creative point of view.
I see that. Amazing. Setting new good patterns. When we get out of it, we can still carry on with the hard work, I guess. It's nice. Can I go on to, please, Oliver, can you please introduce yourself? Because you've been our like angel since the beginning. And thank you, Gwen, so much. And
I'm Oliver. I'm one of the directors of the Vortex. And I think while obviously we do the music that we do and try and do the music that we do, well, at the moment it's impossible, but that's why actually the Resonance has been one of the intriguing features, how it's continuing. What I think is I've found very fascinating, and why things like the Resonance have been so intriguing, is how the whole concept of improvisation and imagination that we know, and something that one very proud of in the jazz context, actually has got links right the way across the artistic and right away across the fields that everyone does. I think improvisation, which has often been treated as a very negative concept. If you improvise, it's sort of, everyone thinks you're doing something with rubber bands and whatever in Heath Robinson form. In jazz, it's obviously celebrated, and more, and artists, it's celebrated, which is why it goes across. So when Aurélie initially, we had the conversations, and how it's developing is really to see how that that improvisation and imagination and interaction is linking through, and is actually having, I think, very powerful effect in terms of broadening one's the concepts into things. So that's why it's been a very fascinating and exciting thing to be involved in, seeing how this resonance is growing as a sort of add-on, but integrated into what the Vortex is doing on a regular basis.
Mm. Thank you, amazing.
Thanks so much.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's been
yeah,
it's an amazing group, and I think the online experience now is actually opening resonance internationally even more. And we can have musicians from all over the world joining the experience, and that's something also a new dimension that we are discovering at the moment. Of course, there is a limitation of the delay with the sound, so we can't have so many musicians performing at the same time. But in terms of visuals, it's we can be as many artists as we wish to respond to the dance and the music. That's great. So I would like also to talk about Mervyn, who has been the poet from the beginning of Resonance.
I can't see him. Is he? Oh, there you
yeah,
go.
He's here.
Nice.
Mervyn Scott, would you like to, can you hear us? Yes, I'm going to unmute here. Him. Yes, would you like to introduce yourself as a poet?
Hang on, I think it's because he's muted. Should we I'll unmute him.
Thank you.
Now Mervyn.
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes. You've been, writing poetry and text linked to the thematic of resonance so far. And we would like to hear your thought as a writer.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting project working with resonance. It's really developed my writing, developed my imagination to explore different things and improvise it in improvising works, whereby you really have to dig deep to really find inspiration to be consistent as well. And I've found it really very helpful in being with resonance. It's starting to develop my work a lot more. Like I've done works which I would never have otherwise have done. So that's always an achievement, especially in being this isolation period. It's like really get time to sort of look at all the horrible things that's happening. You sort of like look back on all your works that you've done, and you gain inspiration from the works that you've done previously as well to write future works. It's been a real inspiration to work with already as well. Now that members of the Resonance group as well were great artists. It's been a pleasure.
Amazing. Yeah, I guess as a writer, as a painter, we are all kind of used to isolation, and we need isolation to be creative and collect all our thoughts and create from them. We need that, because if we have too many distractions, it's really tricky to focus. It's been a period where we can reconcentrate and refocus, reconnect to ourselves. And so actually there are good things as well. Nice. So I think we introduced the core team of Resonance.
We got a few others on the peripheries. I mean, just to say one thing about Resonance, which is very nice, that they can actually do performances across the thing. Musicians, it's a real struggle. I mean, music and jazz is a very sociable activity, and we've had conversations with the musicians how one thing you can't do is actually improvise together. I mean, I know that there've been Halim has looked at it quite closely, and one keeps finding more and more information about how difficult it is because of these delays and the latency. And the fact that we're able to even have the conversations to help inspire, I think is no bad thing, and it'd be interesting to see how it goes further. What I found, I'd like to then draw myself to link up to Carlo, and Carlo, you were saying to me quite interesting features. Carlo as a psychiatrist, and has looked deep and has actually been thinking quite hard about what this actually means in and what we can be doing as well, resonance, in this sort of world that we're in. Carlo.
Can you unmute him, please?
Let me unmute him. Yeah.
Yes, it's. I think that probably the period in which we are, the extraordinary period in which we are at the present time, is a period in which never more than before, we can ask to ourselves, in which myth do we live? No? In which mythology do we live? Because as it is well explained by Jacques Lacan, our ego, our self that looks so intimate, in fact, is a lot the result of the desire of the others, no? Then we continue to enact, in fact, what the others want us to act. Then that's from the child to when we are adult, the society. When we are child is the parents, and then with the lockdown, no, it is in fact each of us taking the distance from these myth that we usually live in an unaware way, you know. For creative people, it's a little bit more, in a certain way, easy to find themselves inside the collectivity. But for myself, that I am an NHS worker, the life is a routine which is dictated by work timing, no, and that make to forget completely your own time, your own self, your own individuality. Then you are continuously projected in your work outside or in the evening at the vortex. But you are never, in fact, who are you? And in the lockdown, like Gwen said before, it's quite extraordinary to have a lot of time to see where we are, who we are, no? Which can be, because we are all seeing it positive, but can be as well a challenging experience, because I want you to remind Oscar Wilde and Dorian Gray, no, that had his fantastic life, always young, always energetic, always what the society like you to be, but had his own picture, no, inside his home that he was hiding, no, and that picture inside his home revealed what he really was. You know, then it's not always all beautiful. It's as well clearly your more difficult, aggressive part of yourself, your vulnerability that frequently you are never in touch with because you are continuously projected in the outside. Then it's clearly a coming back to yourself. It is coming back to yourself for creative people is clearly the occasion to think, to take distance about the different myths that try to have influence us. And finally, possibly doing decisions regarding them, if we want to play them or not, or how do we want to play them, no? And in this, I find that there is a lot of, as well, connection with what resonance does continuously, because resonance is an improvisation which is done in front of the public, no? And the screen in which you draw, the screen between yourself and the public, and there is always this interaction, no? Then I would say that is the opposite of the portrait of Dorian Gray, which is a portrait which is disjointed, no? Where he played continuously, completely in the myth of the outside, but he wants not to know his intimity. In resonance, this is a collective experience, is the opposite, collective experience of putting together, of resonance, resound of what is the collectivity and what is your intimity, no? Then in this positive prospect, I finished, and I hope I wish you all well.
Jane, you wanted to say something, I
Carlos.
think. Jane, did you want to say something? Let me unmute you.
Thank you. Yeah, so really inspired by what Carlo just said, and also, Oliver, by something that you were saying earlier. So this idea of the myth that we are each living, because I taught mythology for many years. My background is psychology and anthropology, and I'm fascinated by how we each create a story to explain who we are that draws on elements that are congruent with who we are. And at the moment, of course, we were talking about creativity, and Gwen, you were saying that being in lockdown can almost make us more creative. And then coming back to, Oliver, what you were saying about jazz being improvisation, all of a sudden, all of us, artists, people outside in general, we're suddenly having to live off script. We don't know what the rules are anymore, and we don't know what they're going to be in the future. We're going to all have to improvise incredibly about our lives, and music and all the other arts are such a source of strength now, and hopefully we can help people out there as well to realize that they don't just have to learn a piece and play it terribly well and get approved by society and the community, but this idea of improvisation being the future for each of us just seems really important and constructive. Thanks.
Thank you, Jane.
Thanks so much, Jane.
Thank you very much. We have more and more people arriving, but already, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yes. Thanks, Lay. Actually, I'm a visual artist, a painter. I started by painting, in an abstract way at the beginning of my journey. It was an exploration of colors and expression of emotions through art, transformation about what is in our unconscious into shape and colors, and then everything evolved, and like every painter, and the idea started to link more with the feeling of joining with other artists and performers, and interacting, dialoguing with sounds, dance, movements, and that's the way Resonance started in 2017, because I really was feeling this need of interacting with other creative people, and see how every medium were resonating and echoing together, and what other dimension it could generate during the experience. So now, actually, as a painter, I feel isolation is really good, because it's a way to redo an introspection on myself and reconnect with ideas that I left on the side for a while, and that I really wanted to focus on reinterpret and restudy deeply. And but as a performer, a part of Resonance, of course, it's isolation is something at the moment difficult to deal with, because we really enjoy this interaction all together when we perform live in front of the audience. And this is, as Carlo said, the Resonance is about sharing the intimity of being creative. When we share our creative process with the world in front of an audience, it's really intimate, actually, as an experience. But that's what all Resonance is about. Is to be freely showing what is in our minds to the public, and make it visual, musical, and improvisation is the key of what Jane said is extremely important during this performance. It's all about this. We don't really plan before, we just think about the thematic that we would like to explore. And during the performance, we discover, and we are on a journey, and we're all surprised, and we discover what's happening. We don't know in advance. And definitely improvisation is, for the society in general, is, I think, the future of everything, because people need to start actually. Sometimes they know how to do it more naturally. Sometimes they had to be teach, and they learn how to do it more and more. We need this dimension in our life, as artists and in the society in general.
Thank you, amazing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I notice we have a few comments. Maybe we've got actually, Adam, you've just made a comment. Would you like to expand that a bit? You said, nice one, being spontaneous is an art.
Yes, I suppose I come at this from a couple of directions, one of which is I used to do quite a lot of multimedia stuff in the 60s. I was doing light shows with musicians and dancers. There was a group called the Exploding Galaxy, which might be worth exploring. And we were relating to everything that was going on in the musical and dance world, visual world, with different sorts of imagery which we were projecting. So it's really good to see this happening really in this way, and it's really fantastic that the Vortex has found a home for this, and I think it's very important. And just to go back to the notion of improvisation that Ollie talked about, it's very much, I think, again, people have touched on this, and that connects with the meditation discipline, which is fundamentally to do with being in the here and now, and finding a way of opening to the world, but also to one's own feelings and expressing feelings and of course, when it comes to being an artist, which is quite a heavy label, I suppose, but it's a trade that you learn. And I think the thing is that there is a thing about spontaneity, which is actually, I don't want to make it too binary, but you can oppose spontaneity to some kind of reactive impulsiveness. Spontaneity is actually very important, and actually is quite hard work to learn how to be spontaneous. And I think this connects very much to what everybody has been talking about. There is it's hard work. It's a kind of discipline of a sort, which we have lots of different ways of getting there, but it's not just the old 60s thing of just doing whatever we like, although maybe it is. I don't know. The quote about Nina, somebody was saying, maybe we are wild beasts, but maybe we need to own that wild beastness as well. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's
Adam.
really good to listen to all this. It's great. And I think this Zoom business is opening up. It's very different, but it's opening up things that we haven't done before. And I don't know where it's going to take us, but it's very interesting.
Just to say, if anyone does want to speak, you can raise your hand on the list, and that's what Petra has just done. So let's bring Petra back in. And
yeah, thanks. I really like what you just said, because you said spontaneity is like hard work, and that's actually what we do when we learn how to improvise. You train yourself to react in the best possible way, and you keep on training to react in the best possible way possible. That's why you study music and you study art and you study movement, to prepare yourself for those unpredictable times. Because at the last Resonance performance we did live at the Jazz Connective, I ran into Aurelie's screen, so that was obviously not a planned thing. So thanks for pointing that out, because I think that's actually a good thing that also sets us up really well for life, because we're just so used to taking things as a challenge first, rather than, oh no, this happened, this unpredictable thing happened, because we're just searching the unpredictable things so we can go and prepare ourselves for it, be it in music, in movement, or right now. I think I'm very grateful that I actually have this instinct in me that I grew over years.
Can I say hello again? And
Hello,
I'm sorry,
Philippe.
I missed some of the call. Hello, Aurelie, and hello, Petra, and everyone. I would like to say that I was practicing piano a lot, and that yesterday I watched a very funny short video by Leonard Bernstein, who was in Harvard University, giving a 5-minute lecture on the history of music. And I think he really hit the nail on the head there, because he showed how music started off with just a melody, and then they sort of invented an octave because a man's voice would be lower than a woman's, and then a fifth, and finally a fourth, and then sort of he quickly jumped into the circle of fifths, which is this harmonic structure. And I was trying to use it yesterday and just jumping up and down the whole keyboard through all the chromatic colors of the sound, and that gave my improvisation a structure which I never really used before, because I learned certain chords and certain chord progressions, but I never really used the modulation to that kind of systematic approach. And of course, he sort of ended the video by saying that they gave musicians a kind of freedom within the chromatic musical structure. I'm sure some of you are very fluent in all of this and have a lot of experience. And yeah, it's I come from a family of musicians, and basically I never really took music too seriously, but because my sister did it and my parents did it. But I recently found my late father's book on Beethoven analysis, and how some people had been picking apart every bar of Beethoven. So I was named after this musicologist called Hershkovitz, Philip Hershkovitz, which is why my name is Philip. And he was a teacher of my dad, and my dad wrote a book about this in English. So, but really, music is about spontaneity, and I think it just, the harmonic structures that were developed gave composers a real power to be able to use this mathematical structure. It's probably good to use it intellectually, but not to rely on it as well. Anyway, any thoughts on that?
Amazing, Philip. Yeah, because you also an amazing painter, so you play music as well, so you link both. Now it's a good period for you to kind of try to make both merge even more on fusion.
Mm-hmm.
On the way you see visual scores, on the way you connect colors to notes, you can go deeper into the thoughts, I guess.
Well, it's actually strange because I don't know how people feel about this, but I certainly, as a child, had a very musical memory, so I could remember things a lot easier than actually read them. And I found it always almost like a dyslexia with the fact that the way that notes appear in different keys on the staves are almost the same. So I always had this problem of how to learn to read music properly. And
a bit like in synesthesia, you see colors when you hear a note.
But at the same time, I don't see, when I look at the score, I'm as stupid as a beginner, really. I start counting the staves, and I've never really surpassed this, unfortunately, which keeps me out of the kind of classical music. Technically, I just can't really. I can only remember it. This is sort of the bane of a lot of improvisers and musicians who have a fantastic musical memory, but perhaps don't have they're just illiterate, like myself. Yeah,
that's really interesting. Yeah, so you reconnected a lot during this period with your musical passion as well.
Oh well, yes.
That's great. Thanks a lot for your thoughts. Byron, would you like to speak about a bit what you do in general? I don't
We have to unmute him, definitely.
I'm only mucking around. Sorry, I saw it was on mute. Yeah. What should I say?
Introduce yourself a little bit.
I'm Byron. I'm an artist and designer, performer, and whatnot. And I set up the UDAV Centre, and we're obviously talking about that, about supporting artists through their journey, through their sort of work, but also with their health. And talking to Ollie a lot about that, about working together and how that's going along, and all that's good. Been writing music pretty much this last 2 weeks solidly for some people, which has been quite interesting. I don't know. I like people just coming together and seeing the magic happen, really, rather than I'm not very good with the whole controlled and planned sort of approach. So I quite like the chaos, and out of the chaos, something good sort of emerging. Personally, but
Yeah. But you launch an organization, a charity linked to mental health a lot, yeah?
yeah. So so UDAV helps people that have suffered all sorts of medical traumas, but more specifically, we focus on neurological conditions that overlaps with psychological conditions. Obviously, they go hand in hand. But yeah, so people struggling with mental health or some kind of brain injury or something like that, and just supporting these people and getting behind them. There's no real like set way of doing that. I think a tailored approach is commonly the best thing. It's like creating some kind of I don't know, formula on how to help somebody with a psychological issue. It doesn't exist, as Carlo would probably agree. Like hopefully, that you know everybody's unique, everybody's an individual. So just trying to create that sort of community feel that can solve those issues, or help to solve those issues.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Just before I go, Jane, I missed what you said because my computer. I went and made a cup of tea and the computer caved in. What was it that you were saying? Because it was really interesting.
I'll unmute Jane again. There you are, Jane.
No, you've moved.
I unmute and then they remute. That's. I think I just leave it to people. I leave it to people to unmute themselves. Okay.
Okay. So I was talking about how this is like a really wonderful opportunity for us to understand about spontaneity and improvisation and drawing on the idea of jazz, but like applying it to our lives. So like my latest book is about living your soul story. So the idea that we each create not only a story about our past, about who we are, and this is based on my training. I've got degrees in psychology and a higher one in anthropology, but we then can continue that story forwards into the future to plan where we're going. And up to now, the last few decades, society has seemed really pretty predictable, and we had books like The End of History telling us that this was as good as it was going to get, but with radically increasing processor power in the computers. And then suddenly everything has been flung back into a kind of kaleidoscope. And when we're planning our future stories now, we're going to have to improvise. Yeah. And we can really think about improvised dance, jazz music, as a really, really positive thing. And so instead of people feeling that they have to control every step in their lives, maybe we as artists can show people that the way is to, yes, to train, yes, to make yourself strong, that you'll be prepared for what life might throw at you, and then to just enjoy the dance. There's that wonderful quote, we used to think of life as a journey, and the point was to reach a destination as well as possible. But that was silly. It's actually a dance, and the point is to dance while the music plays.
Very beautiful.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Well,
I mean, it'd be quite interesting. Certainly, one thing, and that's one thing I feel is that, as you were also saying there, Jane, we're sort of in a world where maybe we need, because we don't know where we're going to come out the other end. It's a time when actually the system or the economy should integrate, like we're integrating improvisation, or take the pride of improvisation into where it moves forwards. Because because we can't plan. I mean, the planning, we're sort of, for people who have, the standard economical views and political views, it's sort of like a process, wasn't it? I don't know, like we're going through, there's Brexit and there's this date and there's that date and there's the other date. But in a way, it's all up in the air. And they probably, they say, well, it's a fog. And at the other side of there, you don't know quite how it's going to be. And improvising is one of the solutions through the fog. They should perhaps get more correctly integrated into solutions generally, and they should come and look at what we're doing here and how we're actually keeping going, maybe. I mean,
yes.
As magician, what I've found challenging, because to me, whenever I improvise, I sort of share the time and space together. The definition of improvisation to me is in the moment. But at the moment, time and space are all fragmented, and everyone has to deal with different time and we're interacting with a different sort of a audience. We don't even share the same audience. And these kind of fragmented sets or context for those kind of improvisation really confusing me.
Yeah.
Me too.
Well, that's it, because when we come out the other side, it's like everyone thinks, oh, we'll all go back to as we were, but we'll be nowhere near back as we were at all. So, which is why one needs to then look for the other ways of resolving it. Petra, you put your hand up again, so there you are. You come back.
Yeah,
in.
I actually wanted to ask Carlo that, because for me, art is social action, and for me, I feel like we can really show the way right now. But I wonder, it's like, why is it so hard for the average person to rid themselves of routines?
Carlo.
Punch.
Yes, it's because of the fact that the routine helps to forget about this side that I mentioned before, which is more a dark side, which is the side of the dead drive, and our vulnerability, the time that goes on, that we become older, the things that we are not able to do, the things that we are ashamed of, all this part of ourself that we have to confront sooner or later. No, the activity, the involvement in the society, the meat that is asking us to live make us to forget about it. Then is a sort of defense to see the dark side of ourselves, whereas creativity has as well to go there, to go in that more dark space. Yes.
Yeah, I totally feel what you say. I think as creative people, we are used to connect to ourselves, to be able to create and to really go deep into the different layers that are in our mind. But for the people who are not artists in their daily life, I think it's a big challenge what's happening at the moment, because it's forcing them to really look into what themselves and to ask themselves the question about their own identity and what can they express, what can they make, create from who they are. And I think it's forcing definitely this period them people to rethink even more than usually of who they are and who they would like to become. And as creative, I think creative stuff and art can help a lot to express.
Well, I would like to add there that I worked as an art teacher for the last 6 years, and it was only in this country, coming here from abroad, that I realized that art was a fundamental subject at schools, and everybody was an artist at some point. And then children end up sort of drawing maybe very early on in quite a sophisticated way by imitating images that they have in front of them. I mean, I've had people sending me images that look almost like, an adult could have drawn something, and they were like 6 years old when they did it. And when later on, I have older students who are doing design courses at the moment, and they might be a mother of 4 or something, and they're still studying fine arts or something creative. They are exploring that, and I think this is why it's not been considered a core subject at many schools. It's been banned, and I know, for example, in Italy, it's not everyone that studies art, even though that's very odd because there's such a rich culture of arts there. But it's not in every school program. It depends what kind of lyceum you're in. But generally, drawing and painting and visual arts and of course musical arts and dramatic arts are given to people at school, and I think they it's up to them to connect back to that in some way, you know, as an audience at least.
Totally.
Yeah.
I think your life and society always put you away from all the creative stuff and all the distractions that you have to deal with in life and the complications. And we're always trying to find the things to get away from the real problem, the real depths that are inside us. That's why people are afraid of being of solitude, because you know it's make you facing yourself. But as an artist, you need solitude to.
Well, one of the things that was constantly repeated to me when I was doing quite advanced training was that, you know, you think you know what you're doing, but look again. Can you just start looking properly? And you know, we could end up spending a whole day looking at one life model or one building and watching the light change on it constantly. And so if you got really good at it, you'd be speeding up your process to try and keep up with the movement of shadows across the you know, the thing throughout the day. And then, you know, in the carving school I did, I was very good at drawing by that point, but they still kept coming up to me and saying, look, are you sure you've got this measurement right? Can you compare it with something else and just check whether your vision is good enough? And so I used to get very annoyed because I thought, well, you know, this is an easy exercise. I don't need a whole day for it. But the point of the training there was to really force me to look more and to force me to show me that I didn't know what I was doing. I think people get very proficient at what they do, and then they do it and they get paid for it, and then everything makes sense. But as soon as we fall into this isolation and we look at ourselves, you know, much deeper, and you're talking about this death drive and things like this, and then how to deal with what we are. I mean, that really is a matter of actually saying, you know, I don't know, and then we get into philosophy. But I don't want to be a lecturer on it. I mean, I'm not sure I have the answer, but at least that's what my thoughts are on this thing, that you don't know. You have to open your eyes again.
I'd just like to mention one thing, which with what Carla was saying and others, I think. The artists may have a very important role. You were saying, I think, in terms of showing what we're dealing with is there is a massive amount of anxiety going on. This is what really tough is happening all over this. We may not personally experience it. We may be in a good place and are able to manage them and enjoy the bits of isolation and so on. But for a lot of people, and I think we need to recognize this, is that there is incredible anxiety going on. And I think that there's a very role that the arts play in of expressing anxiety and exploring it. And I think that this is one of the really big challenges to us as artists, is how we can help people. Terrible of anxiety. There are many people out there, and going through this at the moment, and this is a long time. So, I mean, connecting with what Baron was saying, is, the arts play has a very important, I hate to use the word therapy, than that.
Will the system recognize it afterwards? I mean, I think people are sort of, are we, in the art world, are we, instead of being treated as a necessary, but are we treated very much as an add-on? And I mean, that was one of the things that annoyed me with two things. One is that I know when there was in the Conservative Party conference last year, when Priti Patel was talking about, she talked all about sort of the arts and everything being part of the metropolitan elites. You know, sort of like a luxury.
Well, can I add to that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Panchita.
Hi, my name is Panchita Shanti. So basically, I've only just kind of sort of started studying art. I only discovered about 3 years ago that I was actually very creative, which is weird. But what I found is that people are scared of art. People are really terrified of it because they see that there is, because of the history of European art, it's so great, and people are terrified of that and they don't understand the language. So for me, whenever I create, I'm very good at abstract, I'm very good at chaos, but I'm not very good at structure. So whenever I try to create a piece of art, I just go with it. There's no planning, there's nothing involved. And I always try to, whenever I get somebody to look at my art, I ask them what they think about it, rather than imposing onto them what I think they should think it is. And I think that's what the biggest problem is. And the fact that, you know, in order to be, I feel like a majority of people see it, there is an element of the fear of the language and not understanding, but there's also, it does have this elitist feel to it, because majority of the people that are creative come from a specific class of people. So when it comes to different classes, I feel sometimes their voices aren't heard. So therefore it kind of, in the public eye, it keeps a specific type of people it allows a specific type of people to express themselves. And it's not always people from minorities or etc. It's that, you know, people who aren't seen don't have a chance to express themselves or show their work. So I think it's a combination of people have a fear of it, and the people who are seen as minorities aren't always given the best platform to be able to have their work viewed on.
Yeah, can I just say, I've been studying this. It's about tap dance history, but basically it says a lot about Africa and how integral part art, music, and dance plays in Africa. It's a part of the normal social life. You know, babies already grow up, their parents are singing while they're working, you know, in the town squares there's dancing. So I think we have to also look at where it is disconnected, because I have the feeling it's mainly disconnected in Europe, where it became elitist later. Because if we go back to ancient Greece, it was always body, mind, and spirit. And, you know, also the scientists were working out, and the scientists were also appreciating art. So I feel like maybe this is something we've lost in this society, that it became a separate thing from society rather than an integral part.
Yeah, well, I also think that, you know, because of the system that we live in, things need to be done. So, you know, that whole idea of having security where, you know, you're guaranteed food or you're guaranteed heating or a house, blah, blah, that kind of diverts people away from that creative side. And as we've gone on in this kind of 21st century, 20th century kind of lifestyle, people tend to have forgotten about the internal and just express the external. So there's a lot of fear of what's inside and being authentic and being able to express that authenticity. It's not, you know, it's affected interactions between humans. So because I personally feel it's quite deep. It's quite a deep thing for someone to genuinely just have an authentic conversation. So in the idea of people trying to express themselves in that way, as you were saying, I think that's what the issue is. It's about people being scared to expose what's inside them rather than, you know, just showing what's on the surface. Because we live in such high narcissistic times where it's all just about appearance. It's all about what you can, you know, who you know, and it's not actually about what's inside. And actually, people who then express their feelings are then, or, you know, express their authenticity, are then shot down. So I find it's very difficult to be able to have that authenticity in everyday life, and people tend to hide that.
Is there a danger that actually when we come out of lockdown, they'll actually go the other way, where perhaps we would argue that, look, what we're doing and being spontaneous and intuitive is actually vital. They might actually go the other way, you know, and really try and push it to one side. I mean, another unfortunate story, I remember once hearing a few years ago, there was someone who was actually going into business and sort of taking jazz, saying, look how jazz, you know, you interact, you do social, you know, what it can do in terms of a business environment, problem solving and so on. And I think someone said they were doing work for the GLA, and who becomes mayor of London and kicks the idea out is Boris Johnson, who says, look, this is self-indulgent. How can you have jazz and jazz musicians influence what businessmen are doing? that's the wrong way around, you know. And as I said, unfortunately, that was Boris Johnson he was the mayor of London when that happened. So I don't know, you know, but I think it's what we're saying here is, you know, in the world we're in, that actually what we're talking about is perhaps more vital than ever, you know.
Well, yeah, because
and it needs to be integrated.
Yeah, it feeds the soul. So if you're not feeding that part of yourself, then there's no expression. You know, it's a system of control. So if you cut off the creativity, then you can fill that empty shell with whatever you want, because they don't have that freedom of expression. And I think that's essentially what it boils down to. And as I've got older and growing up in the UK, I've seen less and less emphasis on creativity. Even now, where I'm studying art at Westminster College, I think they're moving buildings, and I think in 4 years they're going to actually completely get rid of the arts department. Which is
I just think we have to fight for this, but also there are quite a lot of things happening on the media which are showing what artists are doing. The guy who wrote The Gruffalo has now, out of the blue, just done a whole book for kids talking about the COVID crisis, and it's a beautiful little book. It was on the telly a few days ago, and I mean, artists are stepping up into a space. They are not quite in the league as the people in the hospitals and the doctors and the nurses, but I think artists are doing around this, and we need to amplify that, and it mustn't be forgotten, and it needs to be fought. We will need to fight and for not what Ollie says could happen. It's not just a done deal. It's how we act that matters.
But people know that the Financial Times the weekend edition of the Financial Times has the biggest art section of any newspaper.
Yeah, that's Jackie Walschlager, isn't it? Yeah.
People know it's important because the people who have the money also have the art section. So it's I think the view got distorted somewhere in the, you know.
Well, it's keeping.
Sorry, we got so Panchita. Sorry, do you want to?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I think again, like, you know, I don't want to. I hate bringing this into it, but like it's a thing of keeping certain people at a certain level. So, you know, people in the people who buy the, you know, you said just now that there's an art section in the Financial Times. Not everybody buys the Financial Times. Some people read the Sun, as like, you know, as much as I hate it, but there's no art in there. No, so it's about what people are being presented, because a majority of people, and I hate to say this as well, do what they're told, and they don't step outside the box of what has been presented to them. So, you know, if you was to start putting some sort of art in some newspapers, people will pay attention to it.
Yeah, well, that's up to the Sun. The Sun should do it. I mean, I think
it's hanging out. Yeah.
Some of those people. I mean, the only thing one has to say about some of the people from the Financial Times who read it have got that enlightened viewpoint. I mean, we received money at the Vortex, and Adam was interrupted, from the Paul Hamlin Foundation. Now, you know, Paul Hamlin, who was a very, very successful book publisher. One of the things that they bring art into the community, which is the project that we were involved with. But I think one of the things he used to do years ago was one day a year, he used to take over Covent Garden and make it open to Sun readers, actually.
Oh, wow.
And he wanted Sun readers to go to Covent Garden. And he bought all the tickets and gave them to, you know, so some of those people can do the job. I mean, other ones don't. They just regard it as an add-on. But I think we've got to try and bring it into center stage. It can help resolve. I mean, improvisation is important, to know how to improvise and say and do this stuff for finding oneself, but for helping others through the society now. And,
Ollie, can I put something in? I don't know how I can raise my hand like this.
Yeah, okay, Loz, please do.
Hi.
Yeah.
Yeah, just kind of thinking about what you were just saying, but also what you were saying earlier about the way the Vortex runs and how it can exist kind of in the world, the problems of, you know, there's this thing we're facing at some point, this lockdown is going to end. How are things going to have changed? Is it going to be taken as an opportunity where arts become center stage, or sort of get given a space at least? or is it going to go back to a even more entrenched kind of situation where you can't get money for anything that isn't kind of commercially viable? Those kind of questions are very pressing for someone who's a regular attender and a performer at the Vortex. So,
yeah, well, I think that's, we obviously, no, I agree with you. One doesn't know the answer. I'm quite nervous about someone like actually the Arts Council at the moment. Actually, the Vortex was within like a hair's breadth of getting a grant as a grassroots venue, and
right.
they cancelled the scheme a week before the assessment was going to happen. It was due to get, and they said, don't worry, you can now put in for another grant, an emergency fund, and you've got like a very small chance of getting it. So, I mean, whether they, and they said it's very worrying how this government in itself will react. I mean, interestingly, just after this, I'm going to join a meeting with, there's a night czar, which the Mayor of London has appointed, Amy LeMay, and the Music Venues Trust, who've just set up something called Save Our Venues, because they are, the venues are in a very vulnerable situation.
Right.
The music venues generally, and I mean, the Vortex, we've been a little bit luckier, maybe because we know how to improvise a solution, but you know, we look at some of these the bigger places and so on, and what the landlords are saying to them is actually relatively quite worrying. And I mean, our landlord has been semi-sympathetic to us at the moment, but you know, that's one of the major things one has to deal with. But it is, you know, whether it's just regarded as a one-year SOP, but it could go backwards, indeed. Again, when they say, oh, but other things are more important, whereas this should be integrated into all the social services that we will require. And I mean, the people who will have the trauma, isn't it one way out of trauma therapy, which will go wild. And I know Carlo and his friend is quite an expert on trauma, but actually the culture that we're doing is probably one of the solutions. It helps trauma. We have an art therapy organization above the Vortex called the Studio Upstairs, and it's going to be vital. But whether there's anyone properly who can fight the corner, I mean, you know, you have a Minister of Culture who's probably the most junior job in the cabinet.
Sorry, can I just
this whole situation? Sorry, someone else.
Yeah, just I feel that this is where perhaps I can be of use, because that's exactly what we wanted to do with the partnership with UDAV. Is we come in and we fight your corner, and we just say, you know, because that's what we're all about, picking up for this kind of sector of things. And yeah, we've got quite a lot of political support. We've got a lot of pledge support. We've been offered various venues by government, and we're just chasing them up just to say, okay, well, where are they? We've been pledged all sorts of things. We've got the biggest property developers probably in London.
Sorry, who's we?
UDAV, the organisation.
Right.
So that Ollie's also a part of. But it's just like actually chasing those up. So people just saying all sorts of things about, yeah, we really believe in what you're doing. We really, you know, we're not going to take that building away from you or whatever. And actually that's what it's all about for us, is fighting that and saying, well, you've said that, so now it's time to sort of deliver on that. And I don't know, that's what my journey's been about. I don't know if that's relevant.
I had a similar journey about 15 years ago, or 10 years ago. I joined a collective called the Oubliette Squatters, who took over, you know, buildings in central London that belonged to overseas landlords. So there was this guy called Mark Guard who got a list of offshore property owners who were all corrupt and didn't want to go in the courts. And so we did their houses one after another, and we used to get kicked out. And we had a sort of arts platform. It was in the papers a lot, because basically we just had like a theatre show every night and exhibitions and art projects that I used to run there. And each building would get, you know, the bailiffs around it within about a month, if not less time. And we managed to get quite a few buildings through this, and eventually it just sort of fell apart with new legislation. And then we did it in Paris, and again, the European laws changed on squatting. But I mean, we just became aware of how many empty buildings there were, even in the peak of the economy, that you know, were privately owned and possibly guarded. So they were just doing everything they could to, you know, keep people out of enormous property. And at the time, I remember people saying figures like 100,000 buildings empty in the UK. You know, this is kind of thing that could be dealt with in the future.
Well, this is the thing. But then on top of that, sorry if I make that, we've been told that we're okay to go into those buildings, so that could be all of us. So we've been given the green light for that. And now it's a case of, okay, well, when, where are these keys? And it's just calling up on that, because I'm just a bit sick and tired of hearing all these pledges. I've had a bit of a tough time with old Sadiq, because he says one thing and then it just seems to fizzle out or change or nothing happens. And I think it's just a case of us gathering together and trying to make people deliver on their word. And I think, because we've already had all the pledges of, you know, you can have this, you can have that, we're behind what you're doing, but it's just hot air, isn't it, really?
Well, a lot of this is not the government that can decide, it's private ownership. So there was one lady in Paris who said she was very happy that the Collectif Artistique was in her 14th century building on Place des Vosges. And they had theatres and there was furniture and antiques and everything was fine. Nobody was stealing anything. It was a use of the space, and she happened to own a lot of buildings. But the president of France sent in the gendarmerie, and they said, you know, no, we can't let you say you want them to be in the building, because it will make other people say that they can give their spaces to artists, and this is not what we want to do. And of course, yeah, this is tied in with other problems like having parties and becoming, you know, places that could be dangerous. With, you know, whatever happens, like people stealing things or drugs or whatever else happens in these spaces is out of control in a sense, because once you're in a building that is no longer kind of secured from the public space, anything can happen. So it's sort of, we relied on ourselves to keep things in order as much as we could, but obviously there's always the good and the bad that come into the equation. So in a sense, I'm just saying it's not just the public, it's not just the government, it's actually organizations that need to be formed with a sort of, with an empire, you know, with a civilized way of doing it. Just to sort of, because you can take that story and you can rewrite it in any way, you know, whether if you're critical of it or if you're positive about it. So,
well, this is the nitty-gritty of dealing with owners of buildings and so on, but just wanted to sort of draw together some people have been talking about being an artist in isolation, and then there's this idea about spontaneity, and then there's ideas about community. And as a jazz musician, the spontaneity comes mostly in the interaction with other people, with other musicians, with an audience. That has gone out the window in this situation. So, you know, I can work at my own training and preparation for spontaneity, but the completing of the cycle is to play with other people in a place where people can gather. And that is what, maybe the spotlight's on it because it's completely missing. I mean, I'm missing playing with kids that I teach in schools, you know, 3 days a week. I go, and most of my teaching involves playing live with people who've only just started playing, but we can still make music. And I invent ways for that to be possible for them. And, you know, I play piano, which I kind of had to get myself together to play piano, which is not my instrument, to accompany them and stuff like this. And in groups, you know, and then with interaction with musicians, we kind of rely pretty heavily on being able to hang out at the Vortex, sometimes play there, you know, venues like the Vortex, but there aren't too many venues like the Vortex. So that's kind of why I raised that question. Well, Ollie raised it as well from his perspective. But this community aspect of spontaneity is essential. Now, I don't know whether society is going to suddenly realize that out of this situation, or whether, that someone said earlier, I think Ollie said it could react against it and go back the other way even further, which is already far enough. So, you know, we're in a kind of critical area at the moment. The bottom has dropped out of any work as an interactive artist. Of course, visual artists, I see the majority of people here maybe are visual artists. So maybe the essence of your work is working on your own with a canvas. Correct me if I'm wrong, or with whatever medium you have. But as a musician, I mean, the music I write requires most of it 3, 4, or 5 or 6 musicians interacting for it to have any life. It doesn't have any life on a score.
Yes. Definitely, you need interaction on sharing the experience with other musicians. As visual artists, I think we really need the stimulation from outside as well, because of you know, like we feel more emotion and everything, and it's definitely creating new ideas inside us. So it's important as well, of course, but we need a bit of a balance of both.
But of course, me and you worked on that together, didn't we? We had the painting which we did together. Which
yes, for the theater, it was amazing.
Yeah, so that was part of a theatre show as well. And
we painted together.
That made it sort of have a purpose, like an applied arts purpose. And then it was a kind of meeting of two visual styles and a history as well, because we had used the play, which was a Greek play, and then we were using Babylonian art to do
So also as visual artists, you rely on some kind of outlet to an audience.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
And orally, you're actually performing your, you know, like a musician doing your art. So you've kind of bridged that funny divide.
Yeah, definitely, because we want to like have the experience from other art field like theater as well, and it's a really important source of inspiration.
Totally. I mean, we probably, I mean, I'm thinking whether we should just gradually draw it to a close, but just to say, I mean, a reason why Resonance can happen at least is because it's only one musician playing and performing in the events that have been done online. But we've been having this discussion, and I had the discussion, you know, with some other musicians, and we're saying that what they're missing is, I mean, there are two halves to the interact. One is your interactions on stage that are essential and we're not going to solve that for 5 years online with this latency issues and the delays properly. And the other one is just hanging out. At least we'll do the hanging out at the moment, and we want to keep that going. Which is why I'll just mention we're going to be organising a whole load of seminars or chit chats, excuses to meet up from the Vortex, and we're doing one this afternoon at 5:30. Which is going to be on women in jazz. We've picked a topic, but I think that's an excuse. But I've actually got people involved who are going to be getting involved from Sweden and Estonia. Who've got things. But it is part of that is keeping one's sanity as a musician in a hard time that we're in. I totally agree with you, Loz, and we're trying to do those a little bit in this. But I mean, I'm wondering, are there any final comments? Shall we just sort of wrap it up for now? Just Aurélie can talk about the Resonance event we're doing on, what you're doing on Sunday, and we're going to be broadcasting.
Yes, Sunday we have our next performance online. So the thematic will be resilience. So it's really linked to what we talked about today, and how we can transform crises on an event that can seem negative into positive, and how we can build our strengths from it. That's what we're gonna try to express on Sunday through our art, dance, and music. So we would like, if you would like to watch us, it would be awesome.
That'll be
at 12
o'clock again.
At 12, exactly.
I would like to add something just to the end, just because we're trying to do a lot of online broadcasting things, and basically we're all a bunch of artists, visual artists, musicians, dancers. Like, we're doing our best with technology, the best we can, because that's what we can do right now, and that's the only mean of meeting and performing. Of course, it's not going to be like performing live, and it's not going to give that sensation, but it's the least that we can do, and it doesn't have to be all the time. But I feel like it's like super positive in general, but I don't know what's going to happen when we get out of it, but we will. This is temporary, nothing is going to be permanent, and we're going to have to face new things, and I don't know how that's going to be. But as in now, as part of Resonance and broadcasting and getting used to like things like open broadcasting, OBS, Zoom, there's like lots of different things to do. Basically, we're going to have this performance on resilience on Sunday at 12 o'clock British time. And, we're all artists, and we're like trying to do the art as well. And then also we're on the technology side, and it has to be broadcasted. So this is an open call for kind of technical people We would, so anybody who kind of, you know, in touch with some technical people, sound engineers, people that understand broadcasting and who like this project, who like jazz, who like visual arts, if you know anybody, and if you can, maybe you feel up for doing it or something, just you know, give us a shout. I think it's really important to also network with each other in that respect, because this panel is for that as well. Yeah, so that's all I wanted to add.
Thank you very much, Leigh, for saying that. We definitely need support in terms of technique.
To have another one of the Salon, we'll do. I mean, we did a couple of the Salon live, didn't we, in the Vortex? And the concept of the Salon, where people can get together and have a discussion like we've had, which has been, you know, because and to think hard and to listen and whatever that a lot of you have done. I mean, it's a shame that we can't sort of peel off into little groups that one would do if you were in a live location. You know, 3 or 4 would go off and talk. There's been some nice comments that people have been making.
I think
but we
it would be a good idea.
Doing maybe one should be doing this every week. Maybe it needs to be done every week at this time, just to keep. It
would be lovely. I would agree.
Maybe we'll do it this time.
Yeah, and every time we do it on different thematics as well.
Yeah, we just think of a bit more of a theme which moves forward. But let's think of doing one same time next week.
Yes, and growing the platform.
Let's try. Yes.
We'll keep
about the
working on
thematics.
it. And I mean, it's lovely to meet new friends that we've done through what we've done today, and you know.
And we are always open to new performers, musicians, visual artists. If you'd like to perform with us, you know, we are totally open, and just let us know. Be cool.
You know.
Yes.
I know. I have to say, thank you very much for everyone here, and I suppose
thank you very much.
The thing on join on Sunday, isn't it? And
yes, follow us.
12 o'clock.
And as I said, we've got our other discussion today on women in jazz. But as I said, Loz, it's partly what you've been saying. It's that the musicians need to hang out together, and if we charge money, we've decided we're not going to actually say give a contribution. We're going to call it corkage, because have a beer at home than it is to have a drink at the Vortex.
It's not quite the same as hanging out at the Vortex while there's a band playing and a whole crowd of people and a beer, you know. But yeah,
we're trying to do something that we can in this.
No, it's great
situation, and that's what actually. So it's very like that's what we're trying to do.
it does do something. It does do something. I've been we had a birthday party for my mum the other day on Zoom with people across the world. It was quite amazing, really. And it can bring people together.
We'll do that. So let's look on that. All right, everyone. Well, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
We'll be in touch. Thank you. Nice.
Let's stay in touch, and we keep you posted about the next one.
Yeah. We'll put this up. I've recorded this, so probably we'll get it up on YouTube as well somehow. So
Great idea.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot, everyone.
I'm
Talk
now
to you soon.
end meeting now. Boom.
Whoa.